Tavern. Why have tax increases and new highs in gold occurred simultaneously in the US? Because as US taxes rise, global trust in the dollar increases. Gold prices rise accordingly. The US has raised tariffs by 245%. So gold will continue to rise. Even India has stated that to balance trade with the US, they can import large quantities of gold and silver from the US. As long as their mindset remains strong, they have three options. Even India prefers to import gold rather than American goods. This shows how difficult the US situation is. It is evident that there is no negotiation this time. In June of this year, the US has $6.5 trillion in debt maturing. It needs to be renewed. What will happen next? If negotiations occur, the pandas need at least $30 trillion, which is $22 trillion. Each panda needs more than $15,000. Each household $40,000. Meaning every panda must work for the US for 2 years. This is just for this round of maturing. Next year, US debt will mature on a large scale. What will happen then? Thus, there is no negotiation. If necessary, they will have to understand each other's strengths. Even if the US adjusts its attitude, the most they can do is alleviate the symptoms. They can provide some technical support and face saving measures. Let the dollar decline gradually, similar to the decline of the pound. However, the current president lacks political diplomacy and financial wisdom to accept a gradual decline. Thus, a new financial Cold War arises. Essentially, it cannot be resolved. Even after temporary relief, they will continue to escalate. Moreover, most people in the US lack the reading comprehension to accept and understand this. This leads to the emergence of straightforward presidents. Americans believe the US is a destined land with privileges. Transitioning from wealth to frugality is difficult. There is a high probability that this new Cold War will last 20 to 50 years, completely collapsing the dollar system. A new financial currency system will replace the dollar, and the trade war will end. In short, they will not solve the fundamental issues, because the fundamental issue cannot be negotiated. Some things are just laws of nature. They are trends. Ultimately, the biggest problem for the US is not external challenges, but itself. One of the hardest things in the world is self-awareness. Whether for individuals or nations, the US relies on 2 world wars, selling arms on both sides, and benefits from the rise of the Soviet Union to gradually reach its peak. If the wars had reached the Americas, with the military capabilities of the US at the time, the current hegemon could have been the UK or the Soviet Union. Later, to support the US, Europeans created the identity of a world police for the US. When the US was framed as a moral model, it became arrogant. The US invaded Iraq, resulting in Iran's rise. US hegemony in the Middle East began to face challenges. Overthrowing Gaddafi turned Libya into a war-torn quagmire. After the US withdrew, Africa's resentment towards the US grew. Ironically, Latin America is a US ally. Yet anti-American sentiment is rising. For 200 years, the US has exploited Latin American land and controlled its economic lifeblood through multinational corporations, turning Latin America into its backyard. The US has committed numerous crimes in Latin America. Moreover, the US believed in Wall Street's narrative of financial power, shifting many manufacturing jobs abroad. While the dollar harvested globally, it also destroyed the foundations of entrepreneurship in the US. Decades later, the US can't even produce masks. Manufacturing is the foundation of developed economies. Britain stabilized its global dominance through the Industrial Revolution. The US, having undergone its own industrial revolutions, surely understands this. Thus, the US hegemony rose rapidly. And it may also decline swiftly. The US reached its peak in 1991, as the Soviet Union collapsed. Now, 34 years later, it is close to losing its status. Meanwhile, the weak and ignorant are not barriers to survival. Arrogance is. That night, Roosevelt pondered deeply. He thought of the countless Americans who sacrificed in World War II. Did their sacrifices lead to such a debased currency? Thus, it seems, gold must rise. However, a reminder is necessary. One must understand what money they are earning now. From 2023 to March 2025, the earnings are steadily increasing. Profits gained in March are the last coins. Now is indeed the last coin. Gold has shifted from information-driven to index-driven growth. This is a characteristic of gold's final phase. This does not indicate a bearish outlook on gold. The last coin of gold is particularly significant. For example, from 1971 to 1980, gold skyrocketed. In 9 years, gold increased 24 times. In the end, it took 6 months. It has multiplied several times. So, this market trend cannot be missed. But now, they need to focus on one thing. The US CPI. The Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes and renewed globalization. Currently, the US CPI growth continues to decline to 2.9. It has dropped to 2.8. And it's improving. This changes the space for the Fed to cut rates. This is favorable for US stocks and gold. The current situation is independent globalization. So, the possibility of globalization is very low. But they must see if there are future possibilities. If the US CPI suddenly surges, then the Fed might be forced to raise rates. Or if the economy suddenly improves. Gold can hedge against all risks. But it does not prevent liquidity risks. Additionally, before the economic recovery, gold will certainly plummet. And it will drop significantly for the year. So, focus on these 3 indicators. Steadily seize the last significant trend in gold. It depends on their ability and determination. Finally, if they like this video, like and follow. Then next time, they will receive updates immediately.